Hello, you're watching World Talks on TVP World. My name is Sascha Fahrbach. The European Union has approved its 21st package of sanctions against Russia after weeks of difficult negotiations, preserving key measures targeting Moscow's financial system and shadow fleet, but watering down others following resistance from several member states. While Brussels insists the package will further weaken Russia's war economy, the compromises have raised fresh questions about how much pressure the EU can still agree to apply. Joining us now is Dr. Olha Zadorozhna, professor of economics at Kozminski University. Good to have you with us. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
So if we look at this package, it's one of the largest in quite some time. Many listings, including banking, the oil price cap continues. So if we look at it as a whole, how much of that pressure, how successful will this be in exerting real influence against Russia?
Well, on paper, this is quite a big package of sanctions. It is definitely one of the biggest over the last couple of years. But indeed, as you said, it got diluted a little bit during the negotiations and talks. And an interesting thing, many people thought that once Viktor Orban, the former prime minister of Hungary, is gone from the office, effective May 2026, negotiations would be easier because he used to block many of the harsher sanctions imposed on Russia. And now once he's gone, maybe people thought the negotiations would be easier. But what we have seen is that instead of Viktor Orban, we now have other countries trying to dilute or water down the harshness of those sanctions. We have Greece, who negotiated an exception when it comes to LNG, because now Greece can still deliver Russian liquefied natural gas, at least for the next year, if they had contracts to third parties starting before the full-scale invasion. We also have France and Italy opposing the ban on visas to all people connected to the military war machine in Russia. And we also have Portugal, for example, who opposed some of the stricter sanctions on trade of fish with Russia. So all in all, what we see is that it's not just one country or it's not just one leader, as it used to be Orban, but it's just, new countries come into play, and it seems that European Union is ready to indeed make Russian economy suffer, but with the constraint that their own economies are not suffering. So there is this constraint that I feel is important to stress and look out for.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think also interesting point you made about not just Greece, but there'll be other countries. I'll ask you that in a moment. But looking at what's contained within, looking very much also like the Russian stock exchange was sanctioned. We've had certain banks disconnected from SWIFT, certain entities. If we're looking, I think, 218 new listings, several individuals, 48, I think, so we're at 3,000 in total. Shadow fleet, another 670 ships added. Let's look at also the good. Where do you see, let's see, the most progress in terms of whether was that the oil cap, is that the shadow fleet, is that the banking elements? Like where do you see, let's say, this was a success?
I think it's a combination of all of those things that you mentioned, because now sanctions target half of all of the banks in Russia. So it's around 100 banks that are not targeted. 32 of them are not cut off from SWIFT, which is a system that sends money between the banks. So this is a very good thing. We also have the prevention of oil price cap rising to $58 per barrel. That would have happened if not for this package of sanctions, because of the war in the Middle East and rising global oil prices over the last half year. So this is going to harm Russia really bad. Also, the circumvention of sanctions and shadow fleet that is targeted is also valuable because this package of sanctions, it targets not just the vessels that Russia uses, but also the companies that help those vessels once they deliver oil from Russia to third countries. So this is also very important. And overall, the more sanctions, the harsher they are, the better, of course.
But at the same time, let's talk about some of those exemptions. For instance, one thing that was supposed to be, I believe, on this latest package was ban on actual ex-Russian combatants entering the EU. That has now fallen away. That's now no longer part of it. As we also said earlier, as you alluded to, with Greece and Russian LNG, but also generally, I mean, if we look at all these exemptions, look at Austria in terms of Raiffeisen, they still have that subsidiary in Russia. If we look at Bulgaria with Mr. Radev there trying to get the Patriarch of Moscow, Mr. Kirill, off the sanctions list. So, I mean, with all these, it seems like the exemptions are growing. So what does that say about mixed messaging or credibility, or is this an aberration? How do you interpret how this was all patched together?
Well, it's a feature of the European Union, so countries have to agree, all of them, on each point in the sanctions package. So this is a natural consequence of these basically system, and we cannot do much if the system is in place. Countries need to agree on each point, and unfortunately, once we have national interests at play, we will see some of the harsher sanctions being diluted. As I said before, countries are ready to harm Russia as long as it doesn't harm their national interests or economic interests, and this is the main point. But another thing that I wanted to mention, given that you also mentioned the Raiffeisen Bank, which is still working in Russia, and there are other foreign companies, European companies that still work in Russia. Well, one of my recent research on the impact of sanctions, it shows that actually when the sanctions are announced, it does harm foreign firms present in Russia, and they lose around $9 billion in value due to each announcement. But it was true before the full-scale invasion, and then once the full-scale invasion happened and many of the firms exited Russia, those that remain are perceived by the market as the ones that actually support Russian efforts. They incorporate this strategy that the Russian Federation has towards its neighbors into their own risk assessment, and so the market doesn't punish those firms as harsh anymore when the sanctions are announced. And so we do not see that valuations of those firms are decreased because of the sanctions. Hence, I would say the lesson to learn for policymakers from this research is that we need more instruments, we need other instruments, and we need to adapt to what the market now perceives.
Yeah, I want to ask you what instruments you might suggest. Also, as you said, like even if the sanctions are announced, certain companies still operating in Russia, they slide a little bit. But that's exactly the interesting paradox, right, with Raiffeisen. I mean, they were trying, and they've been compensated now for their losses in that subsidiary. So it's kind of a strange paradox. So tell us quickly about what kind of other measures or tools you would, at this point, suggest for it being more effective against Russia.
Well, I would say targeting to some degree those firms, trying to convince them to actually leave Russia and move their operations elsewhere. Because if they are there, they're still supporting this Russian war machine by paying taxes, and it's not a good look, and it doesn't bring value neither to those companies nor to just the overall well-being and the strategy of the European Union.
Yeah, and if we're looking, I mean, we've had 21 packages. If we're looking a little bit also in the future, one more quick one I wanted to ask, because I think the shadow fleets, that's an interesting one. And we've had now also, I think within this package, it's now allowed that countries can not only seize, I think, any kind of oil that's transported, but also then resell it. Is this, in your mind, one of the more successful elements of the sanctions package?
Yes, definitely, because the European Union adapts to recent developments. Once Russia wants to still keep delivering its oil, and it employs those shadow fleets. First, the European Union sanctioned those tankers, but these measures seem to be not very effective, and so we continue putting more and more sanctions on the firms that actually help them circumvent those sanctions. So this is a very positive thing. Although I should mention that only last year Denmark was counting how many Shadow Fleet tankers passed their waters, and it appears that it's still the same number as 2 or 3 years ago, and it seems that this new package of sanction may be more effective because the previous ones were not as effective in stopping Russia from using the Shadow Fleet.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think also we'll conclude on the words of Poland's Foreign Minister Sikorski, who said he welcomed this package, but he hoped and believed that more can still be done. So we'll have to see how that works out. Look, thank you so much for that. That was our guest here this morning, Dr. Olha Zadorozhna from Kozminski University. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
And thank you for watching World Talks, but stay right here on TVP World for more news and commentary. Goodbye.